Okay, cool. Yeah, so I started up at the very tippy top of the tower. It's so tight up there. You can literally go so far that you can't physically walk up the stairs any further.
But the detail even that's up there always amazed me. Those little beautiful little windows.
Oh, those little windows are see, I took one of them out so you could see through it. Yeah, the little windows are absolutely adorable. I'm gonna need to.
Where they have the little chains to catch it or something, I guess, when it opens and.
Yeah, so you could open it and pull them inside
and not drop them 1,000 feet to the.
Right, exactly. It was a little concerning, but as long as you trust in the materials and the methods, then you're fine.
Oh wow.
But the way that, I don't know, the few towers that I've been in, I've never seen any with a full set of stairs all the way up to the top. They usually transition into ladders, and even the old North Church, it's a kind of a weird step kind of ladder thing.
Exactly, like a boat ladder. Yeah. Old South Tower is absolutely phenomenal. The stairs continue all the way to the very, very top. It's spectacular. I'm going to need to make a point to go up into the tower when it rains, because the day before it had rained and I found some pooling in the bottom of the windows where the glass meets the frame. So I just want to be mindful that we keep track of any water infiltration.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. I've always been amazed at how dry it usually is up there. I wouldn't get up there that often, but not to that height, at least. That's a fantastic view.
Yeah, no,
what it must look like back in 29? How quickly I forget.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Oh, how could you? yeah, no, you got it. 1729. From what I gather, most of the tower was rebuilt in the 1840s.
Oh, okay.
Is what I heard. Especially the stairs. Most of the restructuring and the interior stairs were done in the 1840s.
That makes sense with kind of those banisters and stuff.
Yeah. No, the craftsmanship is absolutely incredible.
And the size of the beams.
And it's been up there, with very, very minimal minimal intrusion to this day. Yeah, I don't go up nearly that high very often. I will say that with all those porthole windows open, you get quite a cross breeze, and it's an incredible perspective being able to see all the way around up there at the top. I thought for this video that might be fun and special. Just for my own, to try it out and experience it. But the share would be fun too.
Yeah, of all the tours that I was given of the tower, the one that all the guys, I think they were all men, wanted to go up they were architects that were from some kind of a conference in Boston. They had come over to see the building. They were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to the tippy top."
Nice. No, it's awesome. Yeah, whenever I have vendors in working on the building, even the HVAC guys, the mechanical contractors, I'm always happy to give them a tour, give them the opportunity to see the spaces. And that's the first thing. They're like kids in a candy store. They just want to run to the top. This is usually as far as I'll go. This level here, with the catwalk, or I don't know what to call it. That's usually as far as I'll go.
It's usually as far as you need to go, because everything else, most of the systems are down below that.
Exactly.
The catwalk is so spectacular too.
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's in very good shape. Some of the old. Were you here during the Light Boston initiative when they added all the uplighting?
That was when I first started. But then I was here when we had a exterior painting and carpentry project where the filials were some of those were worked on and replaced. The pillars were worked on, and there's a base of one downstairs somewhere, hopefully still around, one of the original ones.
No, it's always very helpful to have historic building fabric. I haven't had to reference it here at Old South, but at Old State, I've had to reference some of the older pieces of millwork that were left over when we sent them out, to be replicated.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job in that whole renovation.
Yeah, no, it looks spectacular. You can definitely tell that some of the columns have been replaced, and it's all in phenomenal shape.
Yeah, the filials as I think they're called. They were like ready to fall off.
Okay, and those...
Imagine something like that falling down onto Washington Street. That would not...
Right? Seriously. So are these finials wood? They look like they feel like they're turned wood when I knock on them.
I believe they are wood, yes.
Okay, because we're having an issue with the finials over at Old State. There's 8 of them, 4 on the lower part of the tower and then 4 on the upper. And those are tin, I believe. And they've rotted out around the bottom. But there's like an interior post that holds them up. So they're kind of like weeble wobbles right now, where they'll shake around in the wind, but they won't fall down. Descending into madness. So I noticed that there's some old signage in the tower, watch your step, watch your head. Was the tower ever like a tour? Were folks invited up into the tower as part of tours, or was that for staff?
It was mostly during the celebration of the bell being installed, and
here it is.
And the clock. There was a little bit more visitation up there, and so
Gotcha.
Staff wanted to make sure. On a regular basis, no. We might have done a couple educational tours up there where people were signed up in advance, like special member tours. We did a few of those, but it was never open to the public on a regular basis. It was always prearranged, pre-scheduled.
Gotcha.
So when the bell was put in, which wall of brick was removed?
It was brought up through where the
like the louvers, where the louvers are?
Yeah, because they added the louvers.
Gotcha. So that had been bricked up.
Exactly.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
There it goes.
Good timing.
What a nice sound.
Yeah. And you may find some photos. Hopefully you'll find some photos of that whole installing of the bell. It was a wonderful project. It was definitely a lot of work was done in the tower in advance of receiving the bell, and then of course raising of the bell. It was through the I think it was through the south window.
Oh, okay, gotcha. The south opening where the louvers
Actually, no,
are.
No, that was the face. That was the face. So the bell was on the north side. Take that back. The bell was on the north side. The face was worked on. But you'll see some really cool pictures with David Hostrasser was there for the bell part of it, of the clock part of it.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. I need to get I reached out to him recently. I'd like to get him back here so that he can help us just adjust the timing on the clock properly. Just because I'm not sure how to do it myself, and so it's the last thing you want to do if you don't know how is to just try.
Yeah, no, he's great with it.
Yeah, no, he's excellent. I was chatting with him a couple of weeks back. He told me a funny story how when they had these clockworks in his shop, because they used whale oil, historically speaking, to lubricate all the moving parts, that as they were peeling back the layers, just the rancid smell of the old whale oil filled his shop.
Oh.
No, it
still looks in really good condition. It's amazing. He really just buffed it up, and what he did to it was transformative. When I first started, it was not in operations, and I got to witness the taking it all apart. He took this all piece by piece apart to get it down in little buckets.
Well, I can't imagine what it must have looked like before, but it's spectacular now. It's in phenomenal shape.
Yeah, I don't know how much he told you. And then the donor who had come to us about taking care of this whole project, he then discovered that there had been a bell attached to it. So then they went in search of a bell, and that meant adding that whole part back on too, because there hadn't been a bell since we had been operating as a museum. Since the church left, the bell had not been there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I heard that the last bell that was there, it suffered a crack, and then it was removed, and that was the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's your responsibility to wind the clock?
It is. I wind the clock. I wind the clock and the bell once a week, and the clock at Old State. So I have three weekly windings.
I'm sure the staff, the few staff that's there now is greatly appreciative because we all rotated.
From what I gather, it was sort of a rotating responsibility, but it's just easier. It's easier and it's a delight.
Well, have you heard the story of who wound it back before it was brought back to life? It was the fire department, the Boston Fire Department, that wound the clock. Because it was given to the city of Boston, and Old South was the highest spot because people didn't have watches. Only wealthy people had timepieces.
Right.
So it was given to the city, and it was housed in Old South. So the city of Boston maintained it and wound it.
Yeah, I heard they were responsible for maintaining it up into the 1920s or so. Boston City Hall.
Even later, I think it was the 50s. We found a letter. I think it was like 50s or 60s. It said, "We don't really want to do this anymore."
Why not?
Here's the pendulum.
And that whole housing thing was built not that long ago, and that was all a part of trying to keep the building a little warmer, not having the chimney effect.
Right, because you'll see a little bit further down, there's that big white chaseway that was built around the counterweight for the clock. Right, so that was to avoid a cold bridge between the insulated and uninsulated parts of the building.
So you're missing a stair at one point too.
There is. As I was climbing the steps a little while back, and it broke away and my foot went through. So I have it in a couple pieces over there. I just need to piece it. I need to put it back together. Yeah. It looked like it had already undergone one repair because there was a piece of wood underneath it to lash it together.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I love the attic space.
It's so cool.
It's an absolutely phenomenal area. And I heard that, so the steel trusses were obviously a much, much later addition. But I heard that the lower pitch of the trusses actually matches the original roof pitch of the building. And then there was another roof that had been added on top of it.
Oh, wow.
And so that lower pitch of the trusses mirrors the original pitch of the first roof, is what I heard. I don't know if there's any truth to it or not. Because as you know, information over hundreds of years.
So those I-beams must have been added later.
They were, yes. The I-beam, actually, I found a stamp, like an iron, like a steelwork stamp from Everett, just north where I live, because Everett had lots and lots of steel mills and shops and things. So yeah, those trusses were manufactured in Everett.
That's awesome.
And as part of the attic insulation project that we have coming up, all of the catwalks and all of the laydown areas are going to be rebuilt and restructured.
That's a good idea. It's always a little precarious walking out there.
They don't seem very to code.
No, I mean I've had to scamper all around the outside. When we were talking to Janine earlier about the exterior lighting to access some of it. We had to go around to get access to that.
That's a good note.
Yeah, it's a very important note.
So this is where you used to have someone climb in here to...
Exactly. That's the only way to do it. It still is that way. That has not been motorized. That is still a hand crank.
That's so cool. And you can see the twinkling of the lights down below. You get a better sense of what exactly you're looking at when you're down in the main hall looking up. I was really, really brave putting my camera in there. I'm like, if I drop it, I'm not going in there for it.
So the screen, Janine, that's in between sort of the ceiling medallion and this interior space, was that for airflow? Was there like a kind of a natural
airflow? I don't know about that. I don't know if it was for airflow, if it was just the materials that's part of the ceiling. I'm really not sure about that.
Right, because it looks like the system has evolved over time because, at the peak, at the ridge of the roof, there's some sort of gravity fed or as the heat rises, it turns the vents on the roof to allow for excess heat to exhaust. But now there's that big plenum that's been built over it. And there are those 4 air handling units that draw the air through the plenum and exhaust it out the roof, by force. So I imagine, an earlier iteration, it might have just been gravity, just allowing the heat naturally to rise up through the medallion and exhausts through the roof. But at some point that plenum was added and the air handling units to draw the air up through. But it works great to exhaust the excess heat, but at the same time, we're heating the city of Boston.
Yeah.
Need like an air exchange. Yeah, no, I love that's a great attic space. But it would be nice to, so the tower has a very robust lighting system. It'd be nice to, to really sort of retrofit, some of those, some of the light fixtures, with more modern LED lighting, something brighter so the tower really glows. There's still a lot of the old CFL bulbs up there. It'd be nice to sort of bring that interior illumination back.
What is that machinery?
I'm not sure.
It's been there forever. No one seems to be able to identify it.
Exactly. If anyone knows, let us know. It's really heavy and I'm not moving it.
We cleaned out a lot of junk, but that stuff just couldn't be moved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful view.
Oh, the main hall. It's such a pretty space.
It really is.
Absolutely spectacular.
And it's amazing how small that chandelier looks when it's up on the ceiling. Until you lower it, it looks like a giant spider. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely massive. You really don't get, you're right, you don't get an appreciation for the sense of scale until you're up close.
Yeah, because the room is so large.
So I had heard that the upper balcony at one time was programmed with seating. I don't know how far back that was.
I don't know how far back either, but it definitely was, and all the documentation that it would have been, all of the stairways would have been internal to the upper balcony. There's one on the other side that's still there. Yeah.
I did, someone had mentioned to me that staircase, the one where you can't see it, it's on the other side of the chandelier, but that switchback staircase is one of the oldest remaining interior architectural elements of the building. Yeah,
so that would have been the same, and the balconies would have come out further. The upper balconies, I guess, would have hung over further too.
Okay.
And seated, and that's where anyone who, people who didn't have as much money, any slaves who may have been an attendant with their owners.
Right,
that's who would have sat in the upper balcony.
Gotcha. Right, because Phyllis Wheatley was a member of the Old South congregation in the late 1700s, I think, even when she was still technically enslaved.
Yes, exactly.
It's absolutely phenomenal, spectacular history. Right, so this space, we're hopefully going to start doing some serious plaster remediation in here soon, because the tower foyer stair is a beautiful, beautiful space, but it really looks worn. The plaster is heavily cracked and damaged, especially down on the first level by the doors, just from all the salt and moisture and things. It happens. You got to keep up with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll take good care. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
And it's always challenging to change those light bulbs. That we just went by that. You have to kind of like pull it over to change those light bulbs.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's funny you mentioned that. That was one of the first things that I did when we acquired Old South as part of the merger between Bostonian Society and Old South Association, was the vestibule lights and the tower foyer lights were out. They just needed bulbs changed. But yeah, it's you're literally fishing. You're pulling the fixture in, changing it out, and releasing it and hoping that it just swings out and finds its center of gravity. And that was one of my earlier pet projects was really deep cleaning this balcony. The chairs were all mismatched. They were all over the place. There was no order, no organization to where they were or how they were set up. We broke them all down, took them down to the lower level, cleaned them, dusted them, polished them, really sort of tried to balance them out and put them all back in place nicely. And it turned out great.
Excellent. Yeah, I think a lot of that was during the ceiling restoration of scaffolding all up that was resting on the balconies as well. So the chairs just kind of got moved out of the way to make space for them.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, this lighting board is still, it still stays true. It still stays current. Barbizon, the lighting designer who was responsible for the whole interior dimming lighting system, they came out, they gave me a full walkthrough, showed me how everything was integrated. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant how they pulled it together.
Yeah, they've been a great support system over the years because we did modernize it a little bit from what had been done back in the 1980s renovation.
I wish the organ was still there. I would have to learn how to play the organ just so that I could enjoy it, because I heard that was why it sort of bumped out there by the Eagle, was to house the massive organ that was installed behind it, so you could still pass by in front.
Now, you winding the Willard clock also?
I am, yes. I am winding the Willard clock. I need to get some more of those keys, because I found it easier just to keep it on my own key ring than to go down to the key box every time. So I need to get some more. All right, so this stair.
Yeah, this is the stairway. That's the original one.
Right, and one of the ways that I can tell that it's a very old stair, and I think I point to it in the video, is the nature of the relationship of plaster and trim. Used to be that trim went up first, and you would plaster up to the trim, which is what we see here. It was only later that you would plaster first and then apply the trim over it. So that method of that construction method holds true at that stair. So it's definitely early construction for sure.
And the lighting that's currently in the upper balcony, the indirect lighting there, we were able to replace all that. And now it's not up to date, but before it was all T12s. And
okay, gotcha. Like the big halogens.
Yep, the big wide bulbs, long big bulbs. And N-Star, I think whoever it is we had for our electrical at the time, they were willing to replace it all to get the usage of electricity down. We still had to pay to discard all the old stuff. They brought in the new stuff and installed it. That was wonderful.
Yeah, it creates a really nice wash over the ceiling when those lights are all on. I like that.
Yeah, the ceiling has a little bit of a bow to it, and you don't realize it until you really study it.
Right, exactly. Oh, Janine, I've been curious. So this patch here on the stairs was left unpainted. There's a lot of signatures, phrases.
That was discovered when we had a break above it. And that's why I was thinking when we were talking about wet system, dry system, there was a break above that in the sprinkler system. It was during that infamous, I think it was a weekend in February several years ago, where it suddenly got warm after being very, very cold. And many systems broke throughout Massachusetts. And our casualty was that, because it had never been insulated. And it must have always frozen and gradually thawed, because in my time it never happened. And so this whole thing down here had to be replaced, because it just came crashing down.
Wow.
Water gushing. It was such a disaster. So when they went to replaster that, they found these old signatures, and just the decision was to not paint over them, just to leave them. Some of the dates were very old, and it seemed noteworthy to keep. So we opted to do that. Yeah.
So had anyone tried to document them or otherwise, trace them?
No, I do not believe so. I do not believe that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Something we can work towards.
Yes. Because it all happened just because when Hillary Clinton came to speak, that project hadn't been cleaned up yet. So that must have been 2016. Okay,
fairly recent.
Spring of 2016, yes.
Right. So now you get a much better sense of the medallion and what the space, what the space underneath it is like.
Yeah, it's kind of like a black webbing. I don't know if the plaster was put onto that to make that medallion. Exactly, not sure what the actual materials were. It's hard to tell.
Right. It seems like the plaster elements must have been wired, to that metal meshing.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Oh, the room looks so good.
Yeah. No, it's coming along nicely. The pulpit has a bit of a creep to it. There's like a gap, between the pulpit and the exterior wall. I've heard that, over years, it tends to get a little bit wider and wider. I just want to be mindful, that we're tracking its progress.
Yeah, I think something Wendell was, I don't know how much in touch you are with Wendell, but I think it's something he was documenting.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, Wendell's an absolute delight. He's wonderful. We've had all sorts of walkthroughs. Brought the new facilities committee through. I'm actually in the process of doing a lot of master planning with Wendell for the property. We just had all about the cooling tower in the attic and how problematic that is. We just had that completely relined, had a new plenum built, so it's not leaking water anymore. But Wendell is looking into the feasibility of us doing away with the attic cooling tower and going full geothermal. Would be excellent.
So cool. I'd love to hear how that works out.
Yeah.
Or even just the technology that he's planning on deploying. I can't even imagine.
Engineers.
Yes.
And then here we are. It looks like exactly what I'm looking at right now. Oh my God, I was exhausted after that walkthrough.
Hello, my name is David Rodrigues. I work for an organization called Revolutionary Spaces. We're responsible for the care and interpretation of the Old State House and the Old South Meeting House here in Boston. I'm the Facilities and Preservation Manager there. Welcome. It's not uncommon for me to engage with protests in my line of work. I'm routinely outside meeting with protest organizers when they collect outside of our buildings. I welcome them, thank them for respecting our buildings, the visitors to the community. All day on May 30th, I monitored the peaceful protests in Boston, and I went to bed that night satisfied that there was no legitimate risk posed to the community or the buildings. The actions of the perpetrators that night are still under investigation. It's a shame that anyone would try to muddy the perception of the peaceful protests that weekend. I responded to Old South as soon as I learned of the destruction on Monday morning, June 1st. Washington Street was a devastating sight. There were boarded up windows, glass everywhere. The only folks still on the street were police, contractors, a handful of news crews. I say we got off easy compared to most, but it doesn't make the situation any less shameful. These spaces represent free and open expression, both historically speaking and still to this day. So one of my favorite pieces of history about Old South still relates to this day. So during the occupation of Boston by the British in 1775, Old South was actually used as a riding school by the Queen's Light Dragons. They tore out the pews, the floors, the timbers to expose the bare earth beneath, and they rode horses around the inside of the building. Sometime later, George Washington stood on the upper gallery looking down on the wreckage of Old South below left by the British, and he reverently expressed surprise that, and I quote, "Those who venerated their own churches should have desecrated ours," end quote. And so knowing what these revolutionary spaces mean to modern Americans as places that promote free and open expression, I just find it ironic that those claiming to riot for equality would be so tone deaf as to desecrate these buildings today. So what challenges do we face in responsibly preserving the historic fabric of these buildings? Well, rule number one is replace in kind. I don't know if it's rule number one. I do remember it's one of the canons of the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Historic Preservation. So when we have something like shattered glass at a historic property, that means that we need to find a specialist tradesman called a glazier. That's someone who measures, cuts, fits, and mixes glazing in order to set panes of glass. It's one of many, many fine arts that are not a common trade anymore. And most professional glaziers are extremely rare and costly. And for a nonprofit, that's not an option. To have a millwork repair this sash and replace the glass to match would have cost us a substantial amount. We here do things a little differently. Historic glass looks very different from modern glass. It always has a wavy looking ripple pattern to it, almost like you're looking at a watercolor. This is because it could have been manufactured using a rolling technique or spun. Most recent historic glass would have been what's called float glass, which means that it's floated to cool actually over a pool of molten metal. So matching historic glass samples is not easy because every glassmaker worked a little differently. Each created their own distinguishable characteristics in thickness, coloration, pattern, based on the mix of silicas or their own manufacturing process. So finding historic glass that would match our samples to purchase is harder still. And then locating some available nearby is nearly impossible. But we lucked out. I reached out to several local glass companies. One of them was Bostonian Glass, and through them I was connected with a great older gentleman named Gene. Gene is the father of the owner of the company, and he particularly enjoys saving any fine examples of historic glass that he can recover from projects. So one recent site of his was a beautiful post-industrial office tower on Kingston Street, just a few blocks away from the Old South Meeting House. So yeah, that was a stroke of luck for sure. While Old South Meeting House is easily 3 times the age of the building on Kingston Street,
Really sorry. I just wanted to check and see if someone else was trying to join. Okay. I think we're all set. I'm going to continue.
Old South has also changed quite a bit over the years. So the last time the window sashes were replaced may very well have been around the time of the Kingston Street building. So we tested samples of our glass in Gene's shop compared to his pieces that he recovered from the Kingston Street building, and all the characteristics seemed to match up. We had the similar bluish color from the silica mixtures. The thickness was right. The texture was similar. All the typical imperfections were present in both samples. You really don't know for certain until you test the refraction. So the refraction is how light is deflected when it passes through a prism. Glass is a kind of prism. So that when the light is shining through the windows, any differences on the refraction from different glasses would be extremely noticeable. So for our samples at this stage to match up so perfectly, and also from a local donor building, was absolutely serendipitous. We partner with many, many wonderful vendors and tradesmen. One of them is a gentleman named Ian Cuby. Ian is a trained preservation glazier. He studied at the North Bennett Street School, actually, here in Boston. Ian is a wealth of knowledge and highly skilled in many preservation subjects. He explained how glazing was traditionally made using lime carbon, ground chalk whiting, linseed oil, and commonly lead in earlier years. Ian actually had to add whiting to the glazing mix when we were making this repair because it was too soft in the hot summer sun facing south down Washington Street. Ian would patiently use a heat gun to soften the old glazing when prepping the window muttons for receiving the new glass. Once the old glazing mix had been softened up, carefully cleaned out, the spot for the new pane really starts to take shape. Glazing putty goes on both sides of the glass in order to seal it in place, and a little triangular piece of metal called a point is pressed firmly into the wooden muttons to secure the glass. Pressing the old panes and smoothing out the glazing finishes the work, and the glazing does take a lot of time to dry. We won't be able to paint it now for many months, but we're glad it's back in one piece and that the bad times are behind us. Thank you, Ian and Jean, for continuing to pioneer preservation trades today. Thank you.